Hi guys! Welcome to Cup of Teach. This time we're going to discuss the trigonometric ratios of special angles. Let us consider the equilateral triangle ABC has a side whose length is 2 units. So when we say equilateral triangle, it is a triangle in which all three sides have the same length. So as you can see in the given figure, AD is 2, BC is 2, and AC is also 2. So kapag sinabi din nating equilateral triangle, we can also say that it is an equiangular triangle. So kapag sinabi naman nating equiangular triangle, all three interior angles are also congruent. So ang measure ng tatlong angles niya ay 60 degrees. So as you can see in the given figure, ang angle B natin ay 60, angle A ay 60, at ang angle C natin is also 60. So equilateral triangle at the same time, this is equiangular triangle. So let us draw here a line segment from angle B perpendicular to segment AC. So itong line segment na to, that is perpendicular bisector of equilateral triangle, wherein it divides the triangle into two equal right triangles. So ito yung dalawang equal right triangles na nabuo natin kapag meron tayong perpendicular bisector. At kapag meron tayong perpendicular bisector, yung angle B ay madidivide into two congruent angles. At yung side AC ay madidivide din into two congruent parts. So, kapag dinivide yung angle B, ang one angle nito or yung angle ABD is 30 at yung ating angle CBD is also 30 kasi hatiin lang natin yung 60 degrees. At itong part na to ay mahahati din. So, yung segment AD at ang segment CD ay magiging 1. Kasi yung isang buo ay 2. So, hatiin lang natin yung 2. So, let us consider again yung triangle ABC. So, let's have here the perpendicular bisector. So, yung perpendicular bisector, binisect niya yung angle B, kaya magkakaroon tayo dito ng dalawang congruent angles. So, ito na ay 30 at yung kabila ay 30. And then, yung segment AC ay binisect din niya, therefore magkakaroon din tayo dito ng congruent parts. So, yung AD natin at yung CD natin ay equal na sila. So, ito ay 1 at yung isa ay 1 kasi yung isang buo natin ay 2. So, consider lang natin yung isang right triangle, yung triangle ABD. So, consider the right triangle ABD, solve for the length of BD by applying the Pythagorean theorem. So, yung BD ang unknown sa given na right triangle. So, para makuha natin to, gagamitin natin ang Pythagorean theorem na C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared. Yung C dito is the hypotenuse, A and B are the legs of the right triangle. So, palitan lang natin ng name nung mga sides niya or yung segment. Ang C natin, the hypotenuse yung AB. At yung A natin is AD. And then yung B natin, that is BD. By substitution, ang AB natin ay 2. So, that is 2 squared na. Is equal to, ang AD natin is 1. So, magiging 1 squared na siya. Plus BD squared. Then, simplify natin ang 2 squared, that is 4. At ang 1 squared ay 1. You just copy plus BD squared. Yung 1, transpose natin beside 4 para masolve natin yung BD. So, pag nag-transpose tayo, you have to change the sign. So, yung 1, since dito ay positive, paglipat sa kabila ay magiging negative na. So, we will have now 4 minus 1 is equal to BD squared. Then, subtract yung dalawa. That is 3. You just copy BD squared. So, since ang hinahanap lang natin dito ay BD, at ito ay naka-squared, so we need to get the square root of both sides. Yung square root ng 3 at yung square root ng BD squared. Kasi ang exponent nito ay 2, so kinakailangan natin magkaroon ng 2 na index. So, ang square root ay 2 ang index, so you have to cancel it. Ay, ang matitira na lang dito sa right side ay BD. Then, yung 3 is not perfect square. So, ibig sabihin, yan na yung final answer natin. So square root of 3 is the length of BD. So let's have here the ratios of the trigonometric function for 60 degrees angle. So ang reference angle natin ay 60 degrees. So para makuha natin yung 6 trigonometric functions, we need to use the mnemonic word SOHCAHTOA. So ano nga ba itong SOHCAHTOA na to? Yung SO, that is sine, is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Ka, that is cosine, is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. TOA, T is tangent, is equal to opposite over adjacent. And then, kailangan lang nating malaman kung nasan ang opposite, adjacent, at hypotenuse. So, kung ito ang ating reference angle, ang opposite natin ay ito, yung square root of 3. At ang ating hypotenuse, yung 2, opposite ng ating right angle. Palaging tandaan, opposite ng right angle, that is the hypotenuse, that is the longest side. At yung side na katabi ng ating reference angle na hindi hypotenuse is the adjacent. So, pwede na natin kuhanin ang 6 trigonometric functions. So, let's have here the first one, sine 60 degrees. So, 60 degrees dito kasi that is the reference angle is equal to, ang sine natin is opposite over hypotenuse. So, ang opposite natin ay square root of 3. At ang ating hypotenuse ay 2. So, that is why we have here square root of 3 over 2. Let's have here cosine 60 degrees. So, ang cosine natin is adjacent over hypotenuse. So, ang adjacent natin ay 1 at ang ating hypotenuse ay 2. Tangent. So, ang tangent natin, 60 degrees, that is opposite over adjacent. So, ang opposite natin ay square root of 3 at ang ating adjacent ay 1. So, simplify natin to, that is equal to the square root of 3. So, meron na tayong tatlong basic trigonometric functions. Punta tayo doon sa reciprocal nito. So, reciprocal, babaligtarin lang natin silang tatlo. So, let's have here the cosecant, 60 degrees. That is equal to, kung ang ating sine 60 degrees ay square root of 3 over 2, siya naman ay 2 over square root of 3 kasi reciprocal. So, since meron tayo ditong radical sa ilalim, kailangan natin itong isimplify. So, we need to use the rationalization. So, sa rationalization, imumultiply natin ang numerator at denominator by square root of 3. Kung ano lang yung denominator niya. So, kapag minultiply natin to, 2 square root of 3, that is 2 square root of 3. At square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 9. At ang 9 is perfect square. And the square root of 9 is 3. Therefore, the final answer is 2 square root of 3 over 3. So, let's have here the secant, 60 degrees. So, tingin tayo sa cosine 60 degrees kasi ito ang reciprocal niya. So, that is 1/2. So, sa kanya naman ay 2 over 1. So, kapag sinimplify natin yan, that is equal to 2. Next is cotangent. So, reciprocal ng tangent. 60 degrees. So, ito ay square root of 3 over 1. Siya naman ay 1 over square root of 3. So, meron ulit tayo ditong radical sa ilalim. Kailangan ulit natin ng rationalization. So, mag-rationalize tayo. So, multiply lang natin ang numerator and denominator by square root of 3. Kung ano lang yung denominator niya, usually. Then, 1 times square root of 3 is square root of 3. Then, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 9. At ang 9 is a perfect square. So, pwede pa natin siyang isimplify. Therefore, square root of 3 over 3. Let's have here the ratios of trigonometric functions for 30 degrees angle. So, ang ating reference angle ay 30 degrees. So, we're going to use again yung ating mnemonic word na SOHCAHTOA. So, that is sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Ka is cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. TOA, that is tangent, is equal to opposite over adjacent. So, identify lang natin sa triangle ang opposite, adjacent, at hypotenuse. So, since ito ang ating reference angle, ang opposite natin ay yung 1. Yung 2 ang ating hypotenuse at yung square root of 3 ang ating adjacent. So, palaging tandaan, ang adjacent natin ay katabi ng ating reference angle. Pero ito ay non-hypotenuse side. So, let's have here the first function, sine 30 degrees. So, 30 degrees ang gagamitin natin dito kasi yun ang ating reference angle. That is equal to 1 over 2. So, bakit 1 over 2? Kasi ang opposite natin ay 1 at ang hypotenuse natin ay 2. Next is cosine 30 degrees. That is equal to square root of 3 over 2. Kasi ang ating adjacent ay square root of 3 at ang ating hypotenuse ay 2. Next is tangent 30 degrees. That is equal to 1 over square root of 3. Kasi ang opposite natin ay 1 at ang adjacent natin ay square root of 3. So, meron tayo ditong radical sa ilalim. Kailangan natin itong ma-simplify. So, magra-rationalize tayo. Multiply natin ang numerator and denominator by square root of 3. Kung ano lang yung radical sa ilalim. So, 1 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 3. Square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is square root of 9. At yung 9 ang perfect square. And the square root of 9 is 3. Therefore, we will have now square root of 3 over 3. So, meron na tayong tatlong basic trigonometric functions. All we need to do is to get the reciprocal of these 3. So, ang reciprocal ng sine 30 degrees ay cosecant 30 degrees. So, that is equal to 2 over 1. Kasi kanina, sa sine 30 degrees ay 1 over 2. So, dito naman sa cosecant, 2 over 1 naman, and that is equal to 2. Next is the reciprocal of cosine 30 degrees, which is secant 30 degrees. And that is equal to 2 over square root of 3. Kasi dito ay square root of 3 over 2. Then, meron tayong radical dito sa ilalim. So, simplify natin to. Gamitin natin ang rationalization. Multiply the numerator and denominator by square root of 3. So, 2 times the square root of 3 is 2 square root of 3. Square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is square root of 9. At yung 9 ang perfect square. So, the square root of 9 is 3. So, ang ating final answer ay 2 square root of 3 over 3. And the last one is the reciprocal of tangent 30 degrees, which is cotangent 30 degrees. This is equal to square root of 3 over 1. Kasi sa tangent 30 degrees is 1 over square root of 3. So, simplify natin yung square root of 3 over 1. The answer is square root of 3. This time, we're going to talk about the 45 degrees angle. So, to derive the functions of the 45 degrees angle, consider the square ABCD with side equal to 1 unit. And then, we're going to draw the diagonal across vertices A and C. So, ito yung 1 sa lahat ng side ng square. And then, we're going to draw here diagonal from angle A to angle C. So, ibig sabihin, yung angle A and angle C ay may babisect. So, kapag binisect siya, therefore, magkakaroon tayo ng dalawang congruent angles dito. Itong angle na to at saka itong angle na to. So, ito ay 45, sa kabila ay 45. So, bakit 45? Kasi since ito ay square, ang lahat ng angles measure niya ay 90 degrees. So, kung ito ay 90 degrees, hinati siya. So, 45, 45, kabilaan. Then, the same din dito, 45, 45 din sa kabila. Then, kuha lang tayo ng isang right triangle dito. Kunin natin itong nasa baba. So, dito, meron na tayong given na 1 for AB and then for CB is also 1. So, ang missing dito is the AC, that is the hypotenuse. So, to get the measure of this AC, we need to use the Pythagorean theorem. The C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared. Then, palitan lang natin ng name ng sides. Yung C natin, that is the hypotenuse, AC. At yung A natin is AB. And then yung B natin ay CB. Then substitution tayo. Ang AC natin ay unknown. So AC squared is equal to, ang BC natin is 1. So 1 squared. Plus, ang AB natin is 1. Then squared. Then simplify natin itong dalawa. AC squared is equal to 1 plus 1. Then add natin itong dalawa. AC squared is equal to 2. So since ang kailangan lang natin is AC, so ito ay naka-squared, kailangan nating kuhanin ang square root ng both sides. So get the square root of AC squared and the square root of 2. Para yung square dito ni AC ay matanggal natin o ma-cancel out kasi ang index nito ay 2. So pwede na natin siya i-cancel out. Kaya ang matitira dito ay AC na lang. And then since yung 2 is not a perfect square, so iwan na natin nakaganyan siya, naka-radical. So lagay na natin dito yung square root of 2. So let's have here the ratios of the trigonometric functions for the 45 degrees angle. So kumpleto na yung ating side. Meron na tayo dito yung square root of 2. So we're going to use the mnemonic board. Again, yung SOHCAHTOA. Yung so, that is opposite over hypotenuse. Ka is cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. TOA is tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent. So kung ang ating reference angle ay 45 degrees, ang tanong ngayon ay, saang 45 degrees natin gagamitin? Or ano ang 45 degrees ang gagamitin natin? Actually, kahit alin dyan, pwedeng dito sa baba or pwede dito sa taas. Kasi pareho lang naman ang ating measure ng legs. 1 dito, 1 dito. Okay? So, kung ito ang gagamitin natin, ito ang opposite natin. At ito ang hypotenuse. So, ito ang magiging adjacent natin. Pareho lang din. Kung dito, ang opposite natin ay 1 pa rin. So, walang pagbabago. Ang adjacent natin ay 1 pa rin. Ang hypotenuse natin ay square root of 2. So, walang pagbabago kahit alin dito sa dalawa kasi pareho lang naman sila ng angle. So, let's have here, kung ito ang gagamitin kong 45 degrees, this is the opposite. This is the hypotenuse and this is the adjacent. Okay, let's go to the 3 basic trigonometric functions. The first one is sine 45 degrees because that is the reference angle is equal to, ang opposite natin ay 1 at ang hypotenuse natin ay square root of 2. And then yung ating denominator ay naka-radical. Therefore, magra-rationalize tayo. Multiply the numerator and denominator by square root of 2. Then pag binultiply natin tong dalawa, 1 and square root of 2, that is square root of 2. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is square root of 4. At ang 4 ay perfect square. And the square root of 4 is 2. Therefore, we will have now square root of 2 over 2. Next is cosine 45 degrees. That is equal to 1 over square root of 2. Ang adjacent natin ay 1 at ang ating hypotenuse ay square root of 2. So, naka-radical ulit sa denominator. So, simplify ulit natin to by rationalizing. So, rationalization tayo. 1 times the square root of 2. That is square root of 2. Square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is square root of 4. At ang 4 ay perfect square. And the square root of 4 is 2. Therefore, we will have now square root of 2 over 2. Next is tangent 45 degrees. And that is equal to 1 over 1. Kasi ang ating opposite ay 1 at ang ating adjacent ay 1. Therefore, ang tangent 45 degrees ay 1. So, let's have now the reciprocal. So, reciprocal ng tatlong trigonometric functions. Sine 45 degrees is cosecant 45 degrees. So, kung kanina ay 1 over square root of 2, dito naman ay square root of 2 over 1. And that is equal to square root of 2. Next is the reciprocal of cosine 45 degrees. And that is secant 45 degrees. So, kung kanina dito ay 1 over square root of 2, dito naman sa secant 45 degrees ay square root of 2 over 1 and that is square root of 2. Next is the reciprocal of tangent 45 degrees which is cotangent 45 degrees. So 1 over 1, same pa rin dito, 1 over 1 and that is equal to 1. So let's have here the shortcut method on how to complete the table for the functions with the measures of angle 30 degrees, 45 degrees, and 60 degrees. So, unahin natin ang sine theta. So, sa sine, maglagay lang tayo dito ng number na 1, 2, at 3. So, hanggang dito sa 60 degrees. Ang denominator nila ay 2. Pagkatapos niyan, kunin natin ang square root ng numerators. tingnan natin kung sino ang pwede nating isimplify. Ang square root of 1 ba, square root of 2, or square root of 3? So, dito, ang pwede lang nating isimplify yung square root of 1 kasi ang 1 ay perfect square. So, square root ng 1 is 1. Therefore, we will have now 1 over 2. So, ito na yung sine 30 degrees. That is 1 half. Sine 45 degrees, ito na ang final answer natin. Sa sine 60 degrees, ito din ang ating final. Next, let's go to cosine theta. So, sa cosine theta, kung kanina ay 1, 2, 3 tayo, dito naman ay baligtad. 3, 2, 1. At ang ating denominator ay 2 sila lahat. Then, after that, kunin natin ang square root ng numerators, lahat sila. Then, tingnan natin kung sino ang pwedeng isimplify. So, ang pwede lang natin isimplify yung square root of 1. Because yung 1 ay perfect square. At ang square root ng 1 ay 1. So, therefore, we will have now 1 over 2. So, ito yung para sa cosine 60 degrees. That is 1 half. Next, iwanan muna natin yung tangent theta. Punta tayo sa reciprocal ng sine at ng cosine. So, pag sine, cosecant. So, unahin muna natin tong cosecant. So, kapag sine 30 degrees, square root of 1 over 2. Sa cosecant, reciprocal nito, so that is 2 over square root of 1. At ang square root of 1 ay pwede pa nating simplify kasi ang 1 ay perfect square, so pwede na natin itong kuhanan ng square root. So, ang square root ng 1 is 1. So, magiging 2 over 1 na to. At ang 2 over 1 ay equal to 2. Next, sine 45 degrees. So, that is square root of 2 over 2. So, reciprocal lang yan. That is 2 over square root of 2. Naka-radical tayo sa ilalim. So, kailangan nating mag-rationalize. Magmumultiply tayo ng square root of 2 sa numerator. Ganun din sa denominator. So, 2 times the square root of 2 ay 2 square root of 2. Then, square root of 2 times square root of 2 ay square root of 4. At ang 4 ay perfect square, at ang square root ng 4 ay 2. Kaya dito sa denominator natin ay 2 na lang. Then, pwede pa natin itong isimplify kasi ang 2 sa numerator at ang 2 sa denominator ay pwede pa natin i-cancel. So, ang matitira na lang dito ay square root of 2. Next, let's go to sine 60 degrees. So, square root of 3 over 2 dito. So, sa kanya naman, sa cosecant, 2 over square root of 3. So, meron ulit tayong radical sa ilalim. Pwede natin itong i-rationalize para ma-simplify. So, mag-multiply tayo sa numerator and denominator ng square root of 3. So, 2 times square root of 3, ang sagot pa rin ay 2 square root of 3. At ang square root of 3 times square root of 3 ay square root of 9. At ang 9 ay perfect square. So, the square root of 9 is 3. Kaya meron tayong 3 dito sa denominator. Next is reciprocal ng cosine, which is secant. So, kapag 30 degrees, we have here square root of 3 over 2. Sa secant 30 degrees naman, reciprocal lang nito. So, we'll have 2 over square root of 3. So, meron ulit tayo radical sa ilalim. So, magra-rationalize ulit tayo. Multiply natin ang numerator and denominator by square root of 3. So, 2 times square root of 3 ay 2 square root of 3 pa rin. Then, square root of 3 times square root of 3 ay square root of 9. At ang 9 ay perfect square. Pag kinuha mo ang square root ng 9 is equal to 3. Kaya ang denominator natin dito ay 3. Next, cosine 45 degrees. Square root of 2 over 2. So, reciprocal niyan, 2 over square root of 2. So, meron ulit tayong radical sa ilalim. Mag-rationalize ulit tayo. Multiply natin sa numerator and denominator yung square root of 2. 2 times the square root of 2 ay 2 square root of 2. 2 times the square root of, square root of 2 times the square root of 2 ay square root of 4. At ang 4 ay perfect square. So, ang square root ng 4 ay 2, kaya meron tayo ditong 2. So, yung 2 sa numerator, pwede na natin yung i-cancel kasi divisible siya by 2. So, ang matitira na lang dito ay square root of 2. So, yan na yung final answer. Next, let's go to cosine 60 degrees. So we have here square root of 1 over 2. So dito naman sa secant, reciprocal lang yan. That is 2 over square root of 1. At ang 1 ay perfect square. So pwede natin itong simplify. The square root of 1 is 1. So therefore, this is 2 over 1 na lang. At ang 2 over 1 ay equals to 2. Next, balik tayo dito sa tangent. So sa tangent theta natin, tandaan kapag 30 degrees, that is 1 over square root of 3. Tapos, meron ulit tayo ditong radical sa ilalim. So, magra-rationalize ulit tayo. Multiply natin ang numerator and denominator by square root of 3. So, 1 times square root of 3, ang sagot ay square root of 3. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 ay square root of 9. Ang 9 ay perfect square. So, pwede pa nating kuhanan ng square root ang 9 kasi that is perfect square. That is equal to 3. Kaya ang denominator natin dito ay 3. Then, meron tayo ditong 1 tsaka square root of 3. Kunin natin yung 1 sa numerator. Then, sa denominator ay 1 ulit. So, 1 divided by 1, that is equal to 1. Para to sa tangent 45 degrees. So, nakuha na natin yung 1. Punta naman tayo dito sa 60 degrees. So, ang kukunin naman natin dito, yung square root of 3. So, let's have here square root of 3 over 1 naman. So, babaligtarin naman natin. So, square root of 3 over 1 ay square root of 3. Again, ulitin natin yung sa tangent, that is 1 over square root of 3. Then, pagdating dito sa 45 degrees, ang kinuha lang natin yung 1 niya sa numerator, so 1 over 1. And pagdating dito sa 60 degrees, kukunin lang natin ang reciprocal nito. So, that is square root of 3 over 1. Kaya ang sagot ay square root of 3. Next, let's have here the reciprocal of tangent theta, which is cotangent theta. So, reciprocal ng lahat na to. So, reciprocal ng 1 over square root of 3 ay square root of 3 over 1. So, kapag sinimplify natin yan, that is equal to square root of 3. And then, dito, 1 over 1, ang reciprocal niyan, 1 over 1 pa rin. So, ang magiging sagot natin sa cotangent 45 degrees ay 1 pa rin. Next is cotangent 60 degrees. So, tingin lang dito. So, baligtarin natin yan. Reciprocal, so that is 1 over square root of 3. So, meron tayong radical sa ilalim na square root of 3. So, ibig sabihin, magra-rationalize tayo. Multiply natin ang numerator and denominator by square root of 3. So, 1 times square root of 3 ay square root of 3. 3, or yung square root of 3, times square root of 3 ay square root of 9. At ang square root of 9 ay 3. Kaya, meron tayo ditong 3 sa denominator. So, eto na yung madaling way para matandaan ang equivalent ng function kapag given ang measures ng angles.
Thank you for watching. That's it for this video. If you learned something here, don't forget to like and subscribe to Cup of Teach. See you on the next lesson. Bye!